turn the page.
Thank you. So I've been fascinated by the idea that history is actually speeding up. The pace of change that we deal with in what we call history is becoming faster and faster. And I think it's really incredible to think about what it means for kids these days to look back on what history used to be and what my generation and every generation before that ever went through and compare it to what you're about to go through and what's been happening around you. Because there's nothing more fun than history, I think we'll throw a little math in just to kind of even out the school references on all this. Because history, I think, can be viewed as an equation. You can think about the pace of change as a result of all the disruptive events, the major big stuff that changes what we do in our daily lives, against the amount of time that you might have to experience those disruptive events in and come up with a speed ratio. And I think for the majority of human history, of course, that was relatively slow. So if we talk about things about 2,000 years before the Common Era, you might have seen one major disruptive change every 100 years or so. When people invented the use of bronze as a metal and being able to really wield that as a tool, things changed pretty dramatically. People stood up and took notice. They had new tools, new things to play with, new ways to solve problems. When we introduced currency, being able to actually show money to people and exchange that for goods and services instead of bartering, that really changed everything for everyone. Introducing baskets as a way to carry and store goods so that they didn't rot on the floor. It was a major change. All of that stuff is pretty simple compared to what we see these days, but also something that really changed everything about once every few generations. This wasn't something that you experienced a few times in your life. It happened every now and again and kind of moved us along. And let's jump that ahead. What about 100 years or so into the current era? Things were picking up speed, all right. But instead of that 0.01 speed of history that I was talking about with that few disruptive change in that much time, now we're talking about maybe 5 major disruptive changes every 100 years. You could see a couple of them in your lifetime, not just maybe one if you were lucky. The creation of the Arch Bridge to actually be able to transport goods over rivers was a stunning change and something we all take for granted, of course. Looking at the water wheel to grind food and make meal and flours, stunning, crazy change. But that happened maybe once every 100 years, and if we jump ahead to kind of where we are today, in roughly the year 2000 in the Common Era, we're seeing on average 50 major disruptive events every century, and that speed is increasing. And I've just got a few of them listed on the screen here because really we could all think of many, many more. But every one of these things, from the invention of the computer to optical character recognition and fiber optic technologies, every one of those things fundamentally changes the world we live in. And we see them every couple of years, and you're going to see them a lot faster than that. Because history isn't slowing back down. Really, it's moving logarithmically at this point. Where, our last math reference, I promise, where we're going from, a relatively steady curve to this extremely steep increase in speed. And you guys get to live through that in a very meaningfully different way than how my generation did it. I want to pull up a couple of examples, though, about what this change looked like in real time. Stuff that I lived through that is really kind of impressive. The fact that the commercial internet adoption rate in the United States started out relatively low in about 1995, according to these statistics from Pew. Let's say maybe 14% of the US population had access to the internet on a regular basis in 1995. And believe me, having lived there, it was really cool, right? You would just get on there and go, in about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to be able to download this picture, and it is going to be amazing, right? It's going to come from nowhere to my house. And we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But within 15 years, by the year 2000 or so, almost everybody that wanted commercial access to the internet had access to it, and at increasingly fast speeds. We really hadn't seen that kind of technology adoption ever in history before the year 2000, and that was kind of stunning, except now it's faster. This information shows the adoption of smartphone technology in the last 5 years, but actually focuses in on quarters, on 3-month periods of time, and on how many new people are coming to a new technology every 3 months, and it's tens of millions. We're not taking 15 years anymore. To get from 0 to 50% of the population was 5 years. And that speed is just picking up, and it's an amazing thing. This photograph with that stunned little kid in the middle is me in the 1970s, right? I got, as a birthday gift, a clock that had a radio in it. Both. I had both of them. Can you imagine? I was so stunned, this look on the face like, oh my gosh, they're giving me a clock and a radio. And that was an amazing, different technology for me at the time. I was so thrilled that it really impacted what it meant for me to own and hold technology. It created this culture of, oh my gosh, this thing's valuable. And I kept it for 3+ decades. I hadn't plugged it in for the last 15 years because it's been superseded. Who needs that thing anymore? I actually got rid of it just last year because I couldn't bear the thought of giving up something that had meant so much to me because the pace of change at the time I got it was relatively slow. And that's just not how the world is working anymore. This is the clock radio in the year 2012. The brand new, amazing, incredible, newest, soon to be completely obsolete and forgotten thing. You know, it is not going to be something that anybody in this room is going to hold on to for decades and go, look how cool. It's a phone and a GPS device and because it's going to become obsolete very, very quickly. And how you deal with change as a result of that speed of adoption is, I think, what I'm trying to get to, that we, generationally, all have to adopt. We have to look at this differently. My generation, raising teenagers, and the generations before me have really got to think about the fact that you're not dealing with what we dealt with. When we went to school, when we went into the workforce, we had different challenges, and you have to help us learn that what you're doing is fundamentally different. We're no longer focusing on the idea of teaching you that you have to have hard and fast information that is solid and reliable and useful for decades, but rather we have to be able to understand that your job, your challenge these days is to adapt to the change and be ready to move on from it just as quickly as you got used to it. And that's such a different thing from what most of us had to grow up with. My generation, sociologists would refer to as Generation X, and all the folks that came before us decided that the best way to get you ready for the 21st century and beyond was standardized testing, and I think that that's just wrong. We cannot ask you to memorize static data and expect it to be useful as a measure of your success in the future. We have to, as the folks that are working on what this technology means and what your futures look like, understand that learning static data isn't going to serve you well. Learning to adapt to new data is really what's going to make you able to take best advantage of the speed of history as it continues to increase. I'm, of course, not the only person that thinks that this is really important. This is a picture of Ray Kurzweil, who is one of those people that has made the 20th century such a stunningly fast place to change. He invented optical character recognition. He invented the ability to take text and turn it into speech. He's the guy that created the computers that did this stuff. And he's also the guy that's telling us, and hopefully telling all of you, that if things continue the way he expects them to, and there's no reason, I think, not to believe him, we're going to reach what he calls the singularity in the year 2045, where machine-based intelligence is going to at least equal, if not surpass, human-based intelligence. That everything that you now have to do with your head, you're going to be able to offload to machines and have them do at least as well as you do. And that is a pretty amazing speed and pretty substantial challenge to what does it mean to be growing up in the 21st century and dealing with that kind of change. You know, this kind of imaginative thing isn't something any of us could have believed would actually happen. And we've got a relatively accurate, I think, smart guy saying, get ready. Your challenge here and your adaptation to history isn't going to be about what static facts do you know, but rather how are you going to be ready to take advantage of the fact that your tools are faster, better than anything that could have been imagined before, and what do you do with that kind of ability? What are you going to do with it? Well, we're not waiting for 2045. You know, the future is so bright we're going to wear virtual shades. This is a picture of Project Glass from the fine folks at Google who are not waiting around for the future, they're busy inventing it. For those of you that haven't followed Project Glass, they've taken everything about the internet and put it into a heads-up display, something that you wear that allows you to have real-time access to relational data that's based on your geography, your current situation, your personalization, and everything about you, anywhere you go, by voice command and visual control. To be able to have everything that the internet is constantly available, but also, of course, suggesting things to you that you might want to know based on the context of where you are, what other people are doing, and accumulating all of that information. That's now. That thing is happening right now. The first beta versions of that kind of technology are actually in the hands of people testing it out in the world today, walking around, seeing real-time feeds and having that available to them. That's not anything that I was ever suggested I would need to adapt to in my lifetime, and I think it's pretty exciting to talk to the kids these days and say, wow, your future is so bright, but it's also so different because it is so much faster. And I'm very excited to look forward to what you're going to do with that kind of ability and that kind of speed. Because really now the limits aren't so much on how fast is history going to move around me, but how are you going to change history based on the fact that the technology you have at your disposal can move that quickly. So I hope to be around to see what you do with it, because I think it's going to be amazing. Thanks.